Welcome to the 12th Annual Air Quality and Health Workshop put on by the British Columbia Lung Association. My name is Veda Peters. I'm staff at BC Lung, and I'm here with Dr. Elliot Martin from University of California, Berkeley. And we're going to talk about the future of goods transportation.
Yes.
How is it that goods get to us today?
Well, goods get to us today mostly by truck. And so in terms of the current transportation of goods, most of the goods are basically moved in the U.S. and Canada by truck. But the relative mode split really depends on sort of how you measure it. And unlike in passenger transportation, where we mostly look at sort of the mode share by sort of percentage of trips taken, in terms of trucks, we look more at sort of what are the tons moved, also what are the tons miles moved, what are the value moved. So it really depends on the actual movement of trucks, the measurement that is made. For example, in Canada, the mode split by tons, just an overall mass moved, is really dominated by truck. Truck moves about twice as much tonnage as does rail, but rail still moves, a respectable amount, about 300 million tons of cargo a year. And it's been growing. It's in 12% growth rate for rail, and then about 20% growth rate for trucks. And in terms of ton miles, in this case, rail dominates. So both of them have been growing about the same rate, 13% from 2010 to 2013. But in this case, when we take the tonnage multiplied by the distance that tonnage is moved in terms of ton miles, rail dominates. And this is an interesting departure in particular from the U.S. and comparatively, where in terms of ton miles, trucks and rail are pretty much equal. And in terms of tonnage, total tonnage moved, trucks dominate far more than they do in Canada. So rail plays a major role in Canada.
Is the situation changing?
The situation is it's changing gradually, but I don't see it changing in a way that is going to cause significant departures from what we're seeing today. We won't see a world in which rail goes away, or where rail sort of overtakes trucks, I think, in movement of overall tonnage. In general, these two modes will always be part of our goods movement system due to the high efficiencies of moving bulk commodities by rail, and also due to the versatility of goods moved by truck.
How does movement of goods affect the design of local infrastructure?
So looking at that, the design of local infrastructure has actually been heavily influenced by freight considerations. And one thing I'll just point out is that freight actually impacts the sort of location, the physical location of any particular city. Many cities are located in areas where there was a necessary modal transfer due to freight considerations at the time. For example, Minneapolis is located where St. Anthony's Falls are. It's about as far up as you could go before you pretty much couldn't move any further along the river. So St. Louis is located where the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi River are. So those types of considerations have really sort of just located many of the cities. But both, the needs of trucks and rail are embedded in sort of the design of much of our infrastructure. For example, in terms of rail, most of our rail lines are designed for cargo trains. And this limits our ability to really regulate speeds or have high speeds for passenger transportation using the same rail lines, because the banking of cargo rail lines is basically designed for slower freight trains, and if you were to bank it too much, the freight trains would fall over, and if the passenger trains were to move around the curve, sort of a low banked curve, very fast, it would fly off the rails. So we have our systems basically optimized for freight transportation, and that limits the speeds of our passenger transportation. And in terms of sort of our infrastructure design, pavements are constantly being managed to handle sort of the weight and beating that they effectively take from trucks over time.
And what effect does that have on air quality in a region? Or overall?
Well, overall, in terms of the impact of air quality, there's a lot of particulate matter that is kicked up effectively by trucks and by rail. But trucks and rail have sort of their relative relative advantages. They have relative advantages and disadvantages in terms of emissions. Rail systems are far more efficient, and so when we're shipping goods sort of over long distances, we generally prefer to take rail travel. Whereas for trucks, there is the relative emissions of particulate matter are much higher.
And how do you see the movement of goods changing over time? What future implications are there?
So over time, in terms of the future of goods movement, there's several areas in which I think there are going to be major changes in terms of goods movement. One is in ITS applications. There's going to be the greater proliferation of vehicle efficiency technologies, such as aerodynamic improvements. There may be new business models and technologies that are also deployed. Also, vehicle automation is going to be increasing in terms of its applications to, say, truck platooning. And then there's also going to be greater applications of alternative fuels for freight. And how fast these grow really sort of depend on a lot of economic and technological considerations. But the growing deployment of each of these technologies will basically improve the efficiency of what the freight transportation system looks like today. But I don't see major changes occurring with respect to sort of the share or how we in general utilize trucks and rail to move goods.
Do you suppose that with more trucks on the road, if they're diesel engined, are we going to see stricter restrictions in terms of diesel emissions?
Yes, and we're already seeing that. I mean, there are already increasing fuel economy standards for trucks that do exist today. So we are seeing regulations in terms of fuel economy for that, and then also in terms of regulations and mandates for technologies that regulate, pollutants such as particulate matter emissions.
Nice to know. Thank you very much for your time and your participation in the workshop.
Thank you.
You're welcome.